My name is Sarah Mitchell, and until last winter, I believed that one small act of kindness could never change a person's life. I couldn't have been more wrong. It all started on the coldest Friday night our town had seen in years. The weather forecast warned people to stay indoors. Snow covered the sidewalks. Freezing rain tapped against every storefront window, and the streets emptied long before midnight. I had just finished another exhausting 12-hour shift at the local bookstore cafe. My feet ached, my phone battery was nearly dead, and all I wanted was to get home, curl up under a blanket, and forget about the world for a few hours. As I walked toward my car, something caught my eye across the street. An elderly man sat alone beneath a broken bus shelter. His coat was far too thin for the weather. Snow had gathered on his shoulders, but he didn't seem to notice anymore. Beside him rested an old military backpack, faded almost white with age. Most people walked past him without even looking. Some pretended not to see him at all. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to keep walking. After all, it was late. I was tired, and I had been warned countless times not to approach strangers at night. But then our eyes met. There was something different about him. Not fear, not anger, just quiet exhaustion. The kind that comes after carrying invisible burdens for far too long. I slowly walked across the street. "Sir?" I asked softly. "Have you eaten today?" He looked up with pale blue eyes and gave me a tired smile. "Not today." His voice was calm, almost embarrassed. I offered to buy him dinner. He thanked me, but politely refused. "I don't want charity," he said. "I just need somewhere warm until morning." As he shifted his backpack, a small bronze pin slipped onto the sidewalk. I picked it up before it disappeared beneath the snow. It was a military service pin, worn, scratched, but carefully polished. "You served?" I asked. He nodded once. "Many years ago." There was a long silence. Then he quietly added something that made my heart sink. "I had a family once." The way he said once sounded like a lifetime of pain packed into a single word. Without thinking, I made a decision. "Come with me," I said. "I know a 24-hour diner a few blocks away." For a moment, he simply stared at me. Then he smiled. A smile so grateful it almost broke my heart. We walked through the falling snow together, two complete strangers heading toward a warm meal. I had no idea that someone sitting in a black SUV across the street was quietly watching everything. And before the sun rose the next morning, that stranger would knock on my front door with news that would change my life forever. The diner was almost empty. Only a truck driver sipping coffee, an elderly couple sharing pie, and a waitress wiping down the counter remained. The warmth inside felt like a different world after the freezing streets. I slid into a booth across from the veteran. "What would you like?" I asked. He studied the menu for several seconds before quietly closing it. "Just coffee." I smiled. "You're getting dinner too." For the first time that night, he chuckled. I haven't argued with anyone in years. A few minutes later, steaming soup, fresh bread, mashed potatoes, and roast chicken arrived at our table. He stared at the meal without touching it. "Is something wrong?" I asked. His eyes became glassy. It's been a long time since someone waited for me to eat first. I didn't know what to say, so I simply picked up my spoon. He did the same. For nearly an hour we talked. His name was Thomas Walker. He had served in the army decades earlier and returned. Home carrying wounds no one could see. He never complained. Never blamed anyone. He simply spoke about life as if every chapter had taught him something worth remembering. When the waitress brought the bill, I reached for it. Thomas gently placed his weathered hand over mine. "You've already done enough." I smiled. "Tonight, let me." As we stepped back into the cold air, I noticed the black SUV parked across the street again. Its headlights remained off. Someone was still inside, watching. A strange feeling settled over me. "Do you know them?" I asked. Thomas glanced toward the vehicle. For the first time all evening, his calm expression disappeared. "No," but his voice sounded uncertain. Before I could ask another question, the SUV slowly drove away without making a sound. Thomas watched until it disappeared around the corner. Then he turned back to me. "Thank you for reminding me there are still kind people in this world." I called a nearby shelter, but every bed was full. Without thinking, I booked him a room at a small motel just 2 blocks away. He protested several times. I ignored every excuse. As he accepted the room key, he looked at me with quiet gratitude. "You've given me more than a warm bed tonight, Sarah. You've given me hope." The next morning, I was awakened by an urgent knock on my apartment door. 3 sharp knocks. When I opened it, 2 people stood outside, a woman in an elegant navy suit, and a tall man wearing another military service pin on his jacket. The woman looked directly at me. "Are you Sarah Mitchell?" "Yes." She took a slow breath. "We've been searching for the man you helped last night." My heart began to race. "Is Thomas okay?" The woman exchanged a glance with the man beside her before answering. "He disappeared from the motel before sunrise, but he left something behind." She held up a small sealed envelope. Across the front, written in careful handwriting, were just 4 words. "For Sarah. Open carefully." My hands trembled as I accepted the envelope. For a long moment, I couldn't bring myself to open it. "Where's Thomas?" I asked again. The woman lowered her eyes. "We don't know. He checked out before dawn. The motel owner said he thanked the staff, left quietly, and walked away before anyone could stop him." I looked down at the envelope. It felt surprisingly heavy. Inside was a neatly folded letter and a small silver military challenge coin, its edges worn smooth with age. I unfolded the letter. "Dear Sarah, if you're reading this, it means I left before I had the chance to thank you properly. Last night you didn't just buy dinner for an old veteran. You reminded me that kindness still exists in a world that often forgets people like me." Tears blurred the ink. The letter continued. "For years I believed my story had already ended. You helped me believe there might still be another chapter." Attached to the letter was an old photograph. It showed a much younger Thomas standing proudly in his army uniform beside another soldier. The tall man who had come to my apartment suddenly took a step closer. "May I see the photo?" I handed it to him. The moment he looked at it, his expression changed. "Oh my God. You recognize him?" I asked. He nodded slowly. "The man standing beside Thomas is my father." The room fell silent. "My father served with Thomas overseas," he continued. "He used to tell us about the soldier who saved his life during an ambush." I stared at him in disbelief. "You mean Thomas? He carried my wounded father nearly 2 miles under enemy fire." I couldn't find the words. The woman in the navy suit finally explained why they had been searching for him. "For the last 6 months, a veterans organization has been trying to locate Thomas." "Why?" "Because he was recently approved to receive one of the nation's highest civilian honors for extraordinary bravery." I looked back at the photograph. The quiet man who had apologized for accepting a warm meal. The man everyone ignored on the street had once risked everything to save another person's life. Then the woman reached into her briefcase and removed a second envelope. "We found this at the motel, too. It's addressed to you." I carefully opened it. Inside was a handwritten note. "Sarah, if they found me, don't let them waste their time looking any further. Some heroes belong in history. I only wanted one last evening where someone treated me like an ordinary human being." At the bottom of the page was a final sentence that stopped my heart. "But if you truly want to thank me, help the next person sitting alone in the cold." I read Thomas's final words 3 more times. Each time they felt heavier, not because they were sad, but because they were honest. He wasn't asking for recognition. He wasn't asking for money. He wasn't asking anyone to fix his past. He was asking for one simple thing: help the next person. For weeks, I couldn't stop thinking about him. Every time I drove home from work, I found myself looking at bus stops, park benches, and quiet street corners, wondering if I'd see that faded military backpack again. I never did, but Thomas had already changed something inside me. Instead of waiting for someone else to make a difference, I started volunteering every Saturday at the local Veterans Outreach Center. At first, I simply served coffee and meals. Then I helped organize clothing donations. Eventually, I began listening to stories. Stories of courage, sacrifice, loss, and resilience that rarely made headlines. Each one reminded me of Thomas. 3 months later, I received an invitation from the Veterans Organization. They asked if I would attend a special ceremony honoring those who had served. When I arrived, I expected a small gathering. Instead, the auditorium was filled with military families, veterans, students, and community leaders. Near the end of the event, the host stepped to the microphone. "Tonight," he said, "we also want to recognize an act of kindness that reminded us why compassion matters." My name appeared on the large screen behind him. I froze. The host smiled. Sarah Mitchell had no idea who Thomas Walker was. She didn't know his military record. She didn't know about the awards he had earned, or the lives he had saved. She simply saw a human being who needed help. The audience stood and applauded. I felt tears running down my face. Not because people were clapping for me, but because I wished Thomas could have seen that room. After the ceremony, the tall man whose father had served with Thomas walked over to me. He handed me a small wooden box. Inside was the same silver challenge coin Thomas had left behind, now carefully mounted beside a brass plaque. The plaque read, "Kindness is never measured by the size of the gift, but by the sincerity of the heart that gives it." Today, that box sits on the bookshelf in my living room. Whenever life feels overwhelming, I look at it and remember one freezing winter night. I thought I was simply buying dinner for a homeless veteran. In reality, he gave me something far greater than I could ever give him. He reminded me that every stranger carries a story we cannot see. And sometimes, the smallest act of compassion becomes the beginning of someone else's hope and your own. If this fictional story touched your heart, remember this. You may never know what battle another person is fighting. A few moments of kindness, offered without expecting anything in return, can leave a mark that lasts far longer than either person ever imagined. Subscribe,